On Biamp's page here, support and Cornerstone, you may already be familiar with the design tools on the Cornerstone page. And in here, you maybe already have used Classroom Designer, Conference Room Designer, and some other calculators and such here. Warehouse Designer is the first choice there. And when you launch that, it looks like this. Put in some basic information about the job, the name of it. I'll call it My Warehouse. And you begin to build a warehouse. If you're a first-time user, at this point, it's going to launch a little YouTube video to get you oriented as the basic steps to move through using Warehouse Designer. We also have a longer format video on how to use Warehouse Designer step by step and so forth. That's also available. And chapter marked, so it's easy to find the portion that you need in that video. Anyway, so you begin a warehouse, and what to do? Well, we're not drafting, it's asking you questions, all right? It's asking you how big is your warehouse and how big are the areas in it, and that's the beginning point. And so long as we fill this out with useful information, we're gonna get a useful design out of it. We're gonna do this one together. Here. This is just an image file from a PDF of a pretty basic space. I'm going to pretend that the right side is tall racks and the left side is low racks or bins or sort of short storage areas and a bunch of workstations. The very bottom of the screen here, we have what appear to be loading docks, so we're going to treat that as the loading dock area in this particular building. And we're going to build that one piece by piece in Warehouse Designer. And if I mess it up, I already drew it earlier, so we already have one if we need. It's here somewhere. No, I got rid of it. All right, we'll start again. So the size of this, I'm going to move this image off to the side here for make it easier for me to find. So I have my dims. Yeah. So the total length of this was, we're going to work in feet, 240 feet, and then 4 inches, 4 and then inch mark. And the height is 96 feet and 10 inches. And in our case, the loading docks are not on the left side, they're on the bottom. So I'm going to turn off the loading docks on the left side, turn on the ones at the bottom. And the bottom of my area here, this travel lane, is 17.4. I had to subtract earlier the 79.5 from the 96.10. All the metrics folks are now laughing at our strange numbers here, and our feet and inches method. So I'm going to put in 17 feet 4 inches, and then I'm going to continue to the next step. All right, this defines the total outline of the space. I'm going to put a flat roof in. I'm going to leave it at 23 feet, which is about 7 meters, and go to the next area. Area 1, you'll see the dashed line. It has used all the available space that hasn't been already assigned to something, and the traffic area excluded. And my first area is not 244 inches, it's actually 120 feet 2 inches, but it is 79.5 feet in the vertical here. And we're going to load that. Now, this is where I find some users get a little confused. So I'm going to go back to the PDF here and emphasize something. On an AutoCAD or any drafting platform, the UCS, the Universal Coordinate System, or the origin of your drawing is always the bottom left of your screen. Which way is left, right? And you know, it's the same thing as the Cartesian plane from when we were all in math class. So that's usually where you start, right? And you draw out to the right, generally speaking, right? In this program, we're on a web page, and web pages only go down. If we need more screen real estate, we can only go down. So our origin is up here at the top left. And getting that clear is probably one of the most important things to understand is I'm working from the top left corner out to all of the other coordinates. So my 240 was to the right, my 9610 was down, and that's how it's placing them. So when I go to place anything, it has to be relative to that. So my next area is going to be 120 along the x-axis, right? And then measure down, right? So this is like one of the really key things that once you understand this, it gets a lot easier to put the correct dimensions into Warehouse Designer. You can see over here in the top left corner, it's a little XY indicator, that's your origin. Okay. So first area, we're just going to leave it named. Area 1 is loaded. The mounting height range is automated. It looks at the ceiling height and decides, well, you probably have a structure below the ceiling that's a few feet, right? And so it's going to now indicate the speakers probably have to be in roughly this margin. If that's not the correct number, just put in the correct number. I'm just going to use this for now. All right. And then the next thing it wants to know is what's going on in this area, because that affects how much sound reflects in the space, how much it's absorbed, and how much noise there is. So in this space, I'm going to use the third choice, which is as you move the mouse, the label changes. Manual material handling. Your other choices are pallet staging, traffic area, automated handling, and pallet racks, which we'll come to in a second. So I'm going to call it manual material handling, because that looked like it was mainly workstations. Going to go to the next thing. It's going to ask, what's the noise level? And this is one of our questions that was up earlier was, how do I know I have enough signal to noise ratio? In ease address and in focus, in either one of these, you have an option to ask it for a signal to noise ratio map. And if you enter the noise, which is down here in the project properties, and you set up the noise settings, you have to know the numbers, right? It'll use that to do signal to noise, but it will not do an intelligibility calculation. It's just signal to noise. In here, we're going to give it the noise level, predicted or from measurement, and that's going to drive the design to have enough level to exceed that and not too much. So if we get too loud, voice intelligibility actually gets worse, mildly worse, but it's not as ideal. So we would put in here whatever we think is the appropriate level. 65 dBA, that's roughly conversation level. We could go a little louder maybe. It's defaulting to general coverage because it's just treating that as one big large open area. And then I can tell it, do I want music or a paging type speaker in there? So I'm going to go with the music because that's where the occupants are. They're doing work. Let's make it interesting for them. All right. And then the next checkbox here is, do I want to add another area? And obviously, yes, we want to do the next area where all the shelving is. So I'm going to hit continue to the next one and put in the next area. So area 2, it's already put in the location. Notice here, area origin, again, is reference to that top corner on the left. This is my left, that's your left, but that top corner in the screen over here, so that and it's using the available space left that remains. We have the same mounting height, nothing else really to change here, and hit go. Now in this case, we're going to put in shelving. I'm going to put in shelving that's as tall as will fit. It will not let you put in shelving that's too high. I'm going to orient them this way. I'm going to change the number of aisles here. And now I have shelving showing here. How loud is it in the shelving? Not as loud, probably quieter because all those boxes and things tend to absorb some sound and it doesn't reflect and so forth. So let's make it a little quieter and hit go. Now it's going to calculate amongst the paging type speakers in the catalog, what are the most likely best answers? And it's weighing a few different things. One is what gets us enough signal to noise with sound pressure over noise? How loud does it have to be? What are the distances involved, and horizontally, what's the coverage needed? And then it's going to rank answers and pick the best answer based on which one's the most intelligible. Intelligible is a word that gets thrown around a lot. Sometimes we mean subjectively intelligible, which means it sounds smoother, more natural projection of the voice. That's one way to use the word intelligible. In engineering, intelligible means mathematically better for speech and communication and hearing and understanding. There's one thing for a system to be loud enough, and you've probably heard a lot of paging systems that are loud enough, but you couldn't understand what was going on. Earlier, we were talking amongst ourselves here, and a colleague made the joke. She said, you know, I go to an airport, a lot of times presume I will not be able to understand the announcements. I'm going to have to find a video board that tells me where my flight is. And when it actually does work, it's remarkable. Like, wow, that it actually worked. And if we're using a tool like this, we can provide the it actually works experience for the occupants here. So what is our intelligibility? We have the direct sound. You can see on the bar here, we're in the yellow to orange, you know, the 80 to 90 range in this area, and then not as loud because the noise is not as loud in these other areas, right, in the upper 70s or so. I can take this little mouse tool here and run it around anywhere in the space to see what is the actual level. So that's helpful. Now, I don't know if you can see that on this broadcast. It's right now, it says 88.3. If I go to the corner, 81, right? Excuse me. And if I select just that area, I get a little more information here. It'll tell me the average is 84, plus or minus 2 decibels, 2.2 decibels. That's remarkably good coverage for just 2 speakers in the space. Well, which speaker is it? This tool here lets me identify speakers by pointing at them. I can point at it. It says here we have an R.153696. No surprise. Tapped at 50 watts. We also have an equipment list over here that lists what do we have in this space, and then everything else you would want to know about that speaker. How high is it mounted? What is the aiming angle? How many watts is it running? Should I make any gain adjustments in my DSP? All that stuff is also detailed out. All right, so what's the intelligibility is what we want to come back around to. I'm going to get this tool again. I'm going to run my mouse through it, and I'm going to see that the numbers are 0.47 at the far corner, 0.55 in the center, and you can see down here it says the average is 0.5 plus or minus 0.02. 0.02 is not a lot of change in STI. We're trying usually to get a score that's around 0.5, higher if possible, and we've achieved that here. We're really close to that. That's great. A 0.5 system is usually understandable to most people. 0.6 is great. You can see the color here. The color scale gives you a rating based on what the standards say for speech transmission index, which is STI. Area 2, we can do the same thing. We can put our mouse in there and see what we're getting. We're getting 0.62 in this case, up to actually 0.74. So it's exceptionally good, and our average is 0.68 for intelligibility. Which speaker model is it? Go to the equipment list, see it chose the CCA 80. So maybe you say, well, I don't know if I need CCA 80s over there in the aisles. It covers really well, but I want a different model that's a little more money than I want to spend or whatever. So we have a tool here that lets you choose which model in the range of paging speakers you'd like to try, and it'll put that in there. So I could tell it, let's try the R.15, and it's going to ask me a question. Do you want to leave the speakers where they are or rearrange them? And I'm going to ask it to rearrange them. See what it comes up with. So now it's changed to the R.153696, but notice my coverage isn't quite as smooth plus or minus 2.7, still tolerable. We're looking for something ideally plus or minus 3 or less. Technically, plus or minus 4 would be acceptable according to AVIXA standards. So that's pretty good results. And if that fits the budget better, fine. Maybe your customer says, hey, let's use the CCA 80 over here, what sounds, so it'll sound a little nicer for these folks. Okay, no problem. So there's a couple ways to do that. I could tell it I want a premium answer, and it'll see if it'll step up to a different model. See what it picked. It did. It picked the CCA 80, no surprise. Or I could specifically tell it I want to use the CCA 80, and it would use it. So now you have that model there. Go back to the warehouse button and the speakers or acoustics, and you see the mapping for the whole space. Well, what about down here in the traffic area? We talked about delay earlier. Let's look at the traffic area, which is called the docks. I'm going to rename this. I'm just going to call it docks. Okay. Look at the design priority and what it came up with here. So it's got 2 speakers. The speaker models are CCA 80 here and here, all going one direction. And one of them needs a delay. So this one has no delay. This one has a delay of 112 milliseconds. So that would be 2 amp channels. Let's say I don't want to use 2 amp channels. I just want to use 1. You know, maybe I want to do it that way. So we could ask it again to break the area in half and do the back-to-back setup with 2 of them opposite each other, aiming down the traffic area. That seems like a reasonable way to do it. Now there's only 1 channel of DSP required, and the speakers are already positioned in this model where they would be if you put them on that bracket that joins them together. Quick question you might have is, well, what if I'm in ease focus and I'm trying to do what you just did there, John? Try to get the speakers exactly where they belong. I'm going to bring up a model I had earlier. If I zoom in really close on these 2, you can see there's the 2 outlines of the speakers. How do I know the distance between them? How do I put the right distance in? You know, so this one's at 0 on my XY axis, and this one is at minus 0.5. And we're working in meters. How do I know that's the right way to do it? This bar up here where it says Biamp is actually the secret bar that has all the information about the GLL, or the basic information about the GLL. When was it published, where did it come from, and so forth. And it says right in there for you, place them back to back 50 centimeters, half a meter, or 1.64 feet. And there you go. Now they're in the right orientation from one to another, and that will match the bracket for these. In Warehouse Designer, that's automated, which we just saw, and we're getting a pretty good coverage, plus or minus 2.8, with 2 of them back to back right there, and that's a totally acceptable way to do it. So we had an automated answer. We've modified it a little bit to our liking. And now we have a system we approve of. We appreciate what this is going to do. We've optimized it to the expectations of the owner and for cost and so forth. And now you want to report. So we can save over here on the right, and pay attention to the URL at the top. You'll see the URL changes a little bit. Okay, and this tells me that these parameters have been saved, and this URL is now in your clipboard, and you can copy and paste that into an email and send it to your friend or a colleague. Say, look what I made, right? Or save it so you can come back to this someday, right, if you need to. Bookmark it, for example. Next thing you can do is export a report. And this shows up right in the browser. And I have the option now to save from the browser and put that wherever I store files. The location of the model is in this blue hyperlink here. So if I forgot to write down the URL, so long as I produced a report, I can get back to this point. And it shows an overview of the system with all the speakers placed in it. And then down here, more detail about each individual area, all the devices in it, what's their wattage, is there a delay being applied, and so forth. Now, in this system, we did not come up with something that required a delay, right? Everything worked pretty well for the area it was with a single device. We didn't have to have a second device. That's the bonus of the coverage of these speakers. It's also just not a gigantic space. If you had a space that was distinctly larger, I had one earlier, I did, there we go, where the first answer had speakers all delayed along the length of it. Even if I chose to make it, do it from the center and work out, now I have delays applied. I know that because the delay apply button is on. And so if we hover the mouse on any individual one, you get your SPL, I'm sorry, this tool. You get the delay and the wattage, tap setting and so forth is shown for each of them. So you got 2 back-to-back and then 3 delay zones. Now, what's interesting is this one here, delay is 82.5. This one, also 82.5. So that could possibly share amp channels, could definitely share DSP channels. So there's a potential for this system to be only 3 channels of DSP to get the signal delays to work, and then whatever number of amplifiers to get enough power to everything. Now, if you decide I could live without the delays, I think I'm willing to put up with that little bit of echo sound or what have you. Okay, that's a choice. You can turn this off and it'll get rid of the delays and they won't show up in your report. But if I save this one and do an export, and you get the report, and you're going to see the delays all listed for each device. And in the program, when you do the equipment list, right here, speakers, equipment list. I'm sorry, go to area 1, positioning detail for, there we go. Then it has the same, basically same information right here.
Excellent. Everyone, thank you for attending. John has his email address down there too. It's john.lufik@biamp.com. If you want to hit him with some direct questions after this presentation, that'd be fantastic. If you have any questions about paging system design, please feel free to reach out here or go to Cornerstone for additional technical support. You can also sign up for our newsletter at biamp.com and stay up to date on all the latest news for us. Once again, thank you so much. We really enjoyed having you and looking forward to seeing you in your next webinar.
Indeed, thank you.
Bye-bye.